Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES. Last part we got here to the JFK Airport and now we're going to continue on. Now this area can actually be kind of annoying for first timers because it's very mazy. The way it works is that in the overworld there are usually actually several routes you can take down to get into one of these platforming sections. And the only way you can tell them apart is by the numbers next to the doors, like this is section 1. And you have to maneuver your way through each of these numbers until you eventually find yourself at your goal. Which I think is 17? Or is it 16? One of the two. Now, the way to get to there is entirely non-linear, if I recall correctly. You can take any route you want as long as you get to it. But this level can take a while. Also, if you didn't grab ropes back in the last stage, grab those now. Because you're going to need at least 3. Thankfully, the enemies here aren't the worst. The most annoying ones are actually those guys right there, the one that just went off screen. The boomerang throwers, mostly just because they try to run at you more often than not, and that can actually be kind of deadly depending on the situation. Thankfully, they can also get stuck on ceilings like that. And here's where the ropes come in handy. They're used automatically as soon as you walk into one of these little pole things. And that's all they do. I think there's more than one area in the airport that uses these, but this is the only one you're required to use them in. At least they're used automatically, because having to select twice and having to be at the proper, possibly pixel-perfect area could be annoying. Anyway, you use 3 ropes, and then you're done with them, so that's about that. By the way, I love the... I know I mentioned it last part, but this game's soundtrack is just glorious. Also, if you need any, there's actually a good amount of healing items in this stage. Don't get used to that, because the next 2 stages don't have much healing items in them. The final area especially only has like 2. I wasn't looking forward to recording that final area. Actually, now that I mention it, I forget if I mentioned it in the last part, but the way I actually went about recording this game was I did small spurts, very similar to how I did the Mega Man Zero games for each stage, which is its own little recording session. I did maybe a few side-scrolling sections, and if the take was satisfying enough, I kept it. If I didn't, I just went back to before that take and redid it. Which is why you might see some very slight inconsistencies in certain areas with my score. I can only think of maybe one time where I outright had a slightly different score and different amount of items, though. And I think we already passed it. Now, my experience with the Turtles, actually, I know I went over this in TMNT 4 with Scott, but we got kind of distracted during that, so I might as well go over it again. I actually started watching the Turtles with a VHS of the 80s, 90s series. We had 2 of them. The first VHS, which was Heroes in a Half Shell, and the one with the pizza monsters. I forget the name of that one, though. From there, I actually went on to the first 2 live-action movies. I didn't see 3 until about 4 years ago, and I'm glad I avoided it for that long. I also actually managed to play a few of these games as a kid, obviously. I played Radical Rescue on the Game Boy and this a lot, even though that's not exactly the best thing in the world to say, because this game is not the best. But I actually did watch a good amount of the 2003 series as well, particularly the first few seasons when they were actually in New York and stuff. I didn't watch too much of, what was it, like Fast Forward or something? The time-traveling one? That was kind of stupid. I was actually really impressed with the 2003 series, though, because they managed to keep the tone overall fairly child-friendly, while still having some pretty adult moments, and actually keeping it fairly close to the comics in terms of content. I actually only saw the Michael Bay movie a few months back, too, and I was not impressed by that either. And the current TV series on Nickelodeon is actually surprisingly decent. Though I do have some small questions about it, like why would they do a relationship between Donatello and April, or at least a little bit of a romantic thing going on there? That's weird. Mind you, my brother has told me he has definite memories of talking with his friends back in elementary school and stuff about why the hell Leo and April should get together or something along those lines, which is all sorts of strange, but then you have to remember kids in the 80s. Well, 90s at that point. We actually still have a good amount of the toys we had, too, back from the TMNT days. My brother's. I didn't really have any of my own TMNT toys. The toys I had a lot of from, like, the big 80s series that are still going on to this day were Transformers. Because I still have a lot of my Transformers down in the basement. Though I really should find all their parts, because some of their parts are disconnected in, like, in different boxes, and that's just, that's just unorganized. Conveyor belts, by the way, kind of suck in this game, but they also kind of don't, because they don't actually push you along that hard. It's the things that they're usually around that suck, usually the spikes, because the spikes, I think, do 1 to 2 units of damage, which is really lethal, actually. But, yeah, as you can see, this place is more or less just a labyrinth. It's not that hard to find your way around it if you know where to go, but then again, that's kind of the secret of all labyrinths. Finding out where to go is the biggest part of it. But even then, there aren't that many options as to where to go. A lot of areas are dead ends and just don't have anything worth it in them. Though if I recall correctly, this is actually the first level in the game off the top of my head that actually has an invincibility power-up. Yeah, there's invincibility power-ups in this game. They're very rare. I only know where 2 of them are, so there's not that many. And one's coming up here towards the end of the level. I don't go for it because it requires me to go off the beaten path, but I'll tell you, it's there. I'll tell you that for a fact. Actually, who did do this game's music? Let's see. Composed by Jun Funahashi, who did Bayou Billy on the NES, Castlevania 3, Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo. Oh, wow, this guy's actually done some really good stuff. And it was arranged by Hidenori Maizawa, who's done Goonies 2, Contra, Bayou Billy, Gradius 2, Akamajo Densetsu, Sunset Riders. Ooh, these guys have done some really good stuff. Besides this, that's really impressive, actually. I like that. Yeah, I know I mentioned it before, but I really am a giant game music buff. That's like what composes 80% of my Google Play library. And yes, just by that, you can tell that I'm an Android guy, not an Apple guy. I don't hold anything against Apple as it practices, but I don't like their products that much. One thing that this level introduces, which you've seen a lot at this point, actually, are these little cross-shaped laser-firing enemies. They always only take 1 hit to die, so you can do it with any turtle, but they can be pretty annoying just by the fact that at times like this, they can be in your way. Oh yeah, this is the thing. This game has a lot of sprite flickering, if you can't tell. To the point where that pizza that was that's right there, you didn't see that earlier because its sprite was flickering so much. It's not as bad as, say, Mega Man 2, but if there's enough happening on screen, you can outright miss some enemies being there because you just can't see them. Oh, I should probably mention this. Sorry if I sound a bit stuffed up right now. I don't know why, but my nose has been acting up like the past 2 days, and I'm not entirely sure why. But yeah, this area, it's not the hardest thing in the world, but finding your way around can be a bit tedious. Also, the invincibility power-up is in the bottom of these 2 other tunnels. You have to go through a bit to get it, but it's worth it in my eyes. The invincibility power-up actually works very similarly to the one that we had in Turtles 4, that bomb pizza box that causes us to go absolutely batshit crazy and start spinning. It does more or less the exact same here. You start spinning your weapons in a circle, and you just can walk through enemies. They're actually shaped like a turtle head, so that's how you know you'll find one. Also, you know what's one thing I find odd? I forgot about it until I did the thumbnail for the last part, but this game's box art actually uses one of the comics covers for its box art. And you can tell that because all the turtles are wearing red instead of the usual colors. I think the colors are brought in by the cartoon? So that's a bit of an interesting fact. Also, this section sucks. Watch out for these spike walls. Your instant kill, you need to be really precise in order to get through this. The way I can recommend going about it is, by the way, first off, that pizza is impossible to get. Is that when you go off a ledge, stop holding the button the moment you go halfway off, because then you'll more than likely go flying right off and down the pit that you want to go down. And then we get Donnie out, because this boss fight is easiest with him. Our boss fight this time around is a giant mouser, I guess? And as you can see, he's very exploitable as Donnie because you can just stand right in between him while his eyes fire lasers and then just attack his little weak point that he spawns the Mousers out of. With the other turtles, this can actually be really annoying, but with Donnie, it stands no real chance at all. Which, mind you, I like it when boss fights have things you can abuse like that, but at the same time, it's also kind of anticlimactic. Heh, we blew that thing's mind. Go to the enemy base by Blimp. You have my support. Yeah, you've said that. I'll be honest, I had no reason to be silent for that. Yeah, the turtle blimp is a thing, by the way. Find the way to the underground Technodrome. You can do it. This area sucks. Even though the music is actually oddly happy. The way it works is that the Technodrome can locate and appear in one of three areas. The top right, the bottom right, and the bottom left holes. But it's random as to which one shows up. There's a Foot Clan door at the end of each one of them. But whether or not you enter it is entirely luck-based. Thankfully, I got it on my first try. But yeah, if you know where to go and if you get lucky, this stage 4 here is actually really, really simple. Or is this stage 5? Either way, it's really easy. A lot of the enemies don't do that much damage either. There's some enemies that actually, I think, don't actually damage you enough to do a full unit of damage. Unless your HP overflows. Either way, next boss fight is the oddly small-looking Technodrome. And this fight's kind of tricky at first, because first off, we can't board it yet. We have to get on top of that conveyor belt, or its treads rather. But as you can see, it has an electric prong kind of trying to kill us. So we need to wait for that electricity to go away and jump over the little blue staircase there, because that'll still damage you for some reason. At which point, the fight actually begins. Also, they spawn out foot troops, even though they're not really that worth using. First off in the fight, you want to take care of these two turrets, which can take a couple of shots from either Leo or Don, so they're actually pretty healthy. But enough damage and they will go down. By the way, I love the fight music here. After that, the fight actually becomes very simple, because then we can actually attack the eyeball. The eyeball actually doesn't have that much health. I think it can only survive maybe 10 shots from Donnie. So if you just keep on your toes and kill the foot soldiers before they can get to you, this fight should not give you any real trouble at all. Kind of anticlimactic though for being what is more or less the main villain hideout throughout the series. You know, there's always one thing my brother Chris wanted apparently as a kid, and it was actually a Technodrome toy. That was like the one big set we didn't really have for TMNT that he really wanted. Because we had the sewer hideout play set. In fact, I think that's still in the basement somewhere, but the Technodrome was something he always wanted but never got. Though apparently he just got one of the Turtle Van toys, although apparently it may have been the one from the 2007 movie from what I heard. Either way, the Technodrome is actually a pretty easy fight if you know what to do, but it can still give you some trouble if you're new to the game. And with that, we're on to the final stage already. Yeah, this is definitely an NES game. Overly hard, but really short. But this final stage sucks. You are great. This is the final battle. You have my support. Why do you keep saying that? First off, you have no map for this area, so if you want to know where to go, you're going to have to look online. And there are enemies everywhere, and these enemies right here, the flying jetpack guys, are my least favorite ones of all. Why? First off, I hate enemies that move a lot, especially midair. And secondly, they actually do a decent chunk of damage. I think like 1.5 to 2 full units of damage, which is kind of ridiculous. Yeah, look at that, 1.5. And their lasers do the exact same, except their lasers can first off follow you more quickly, and they can be aimed at a good amount of angles, so watch out for that. In fact, I can say for a fact, this section has a bit too many enemies. Especially these little turret things. The way they work is that once they're aimed in a certain direction long enough, they'll start shooting a barrage of shots. It seems like it's a 3-burst, but it's not, I think. So you just have to stay on your toes and hope you can kill them. There are a couple routes you can take this place, though. You can either go with the way I'm going with right now and head down the next ladder, but that takes you into a fairly difficult area where there's a few enemies, but they're surrounded by spikes, so you can get knocked down into pretty high damage pretty quickly. So it's kind of annoying. So I'm going to go the top route, which is a bit less dangerous in terms of environment, but has a few more enemies. Also, I recommend at this point healing up Donnie and Leo almost exclusively if you find any healing items, because they're a lot more worth keeping alive. There is actually a turtle you can rescue in this area if you go the bottom route, but I haven't lost a single turtle yet, so I'm good. I hate these robot kangaroos. Thankfully, the scrolls take them out pretty quickly. In fact, scrolls are your best friend in this area. There's actually a restock coming up in this next room if you go all the way left, but I don't go for them because 7's more than enough for me for the rest of the game. we're actually also coming up on the point where all the routes kind of converge, because this silver area coming up here is more or less where everything connects. There's always, no matter which route you go, there's going to be one of these long shafts that more or less serves as a point of no return. You can't jump back up there no matter what. And it's kind of annoying. Also, there's an enemy you can face with the floor right there if you know what to do. This area is where the difficulty kind of gets a bit annoying just due to the amount of enemies they start throwing at you, because coming up, there's going to be like 2 to 3 kangaroos at a time, which is ridiculous. Also, as I mentioned, if you go all the way left here, you can find some scrolls. Now, the truly annoying thing about this area is the lack of healing items to go with the amount of enemies. There's only 3 of that. Full pizza I got earlier, a half pizza, I believe, coming up here on the right, which I don't go for because it's not really worth it at all. And another full pizza, which is the last healing item in the game that I always go for because I like having a good amount of HP. Thankfully, that half pizza and the full pizza are actually pretty close together if you want to go for them. But I don't recommend going right because there's just so many enemies that it's not worth it. I always kill that turret because that's a really dickishly placed. But down here is the last healing item of the game, so I recommend going for it. I do believe if you lose all your turtles here, you have to restart this entire area, so don't go for that. Though if the game's really dickish, what it would probably do is send you right back to before the Technodrome, which it actually might now that I think about it. I don't remember because I haven't actually gotten the game over in this area in a good amount of years, but I could believe it. Also, if I recall correctly, we're actually coming up on a fairly sizable cut here. Yeah, right now. That was like a 2-hour Skype call. As I was saying, if you're of a playstyle like me and you prefer to use Leo and Donnie for any kind of fights, use these next couple of rooms as bullet fodder for Raph and Mikey, because you're not going to get much use out of them otherwise. And here's the invincibility power-up. You grab it, and you're invincible. I do believe every character has the same range, though, so you can be anyone here. I just prefer to use Donnie, just because then I can have him ready for the next section if I decide to use him. This last trek sucks. Also, yeah, as you can see, pausing can despawn some enemies, because it's only those little hovering enemies and the jetpack mooks. And the game repeats that pattern over and over and over again, getting smaller as the area goes on. Admittedly, the later you get on, there's actually a bit more of a pattern you can abuse where the enemies will start just backing off from you if you stop moving at a certain point. I'm not sure if you can do that through all of it, because I always remember you can do it in that one section, but I've never tested it in the other areas. And as you can see, yeah, these enemies really hurt. And now I'm just starting to cut out changing turtles in general, just because my sections just started getting really tiny. I hate this section. This section is usually the part I look the least forward to when I'm playing the game, because the difficulty spike is pretty ridiculous, honestly. I mean, the game's hard enough as it is, yeah, but this final area takes it from maybe 6, 7 difficulty to easy 9, 10, and it's honestly kind of bullshit. Thankfully, only the last levels really like this, so for the most part, the game's pretty stable. And as you can see, I'm using that pattern pretty well there. And with that, we're almost done with the level, actually. But they're, of course, going to throw a one last enemy at us. You might remember those little mini-boss fights we've had? Time for the final one. I can recommend any turtle for this, as long as it's not Donnie, because you want him to have as much health as he can. Ow! Well, he's dead. And now we're going to get out Donnie. I recommend using the scrolls coming up here, because the final boss can actually be pretty challenging. In fact, if you just pause the game at any given point, Shredder and April will warn you that his gun attack is instant kill. Final boss of the game is Shredder, and he hurts. His gun's instant kill, and he does about, I think, maybe a third or a half of your health bar. Thankfully, if you spam scrolls, you can do a good amount of damage to him. I think he actually has more health in this show, too. Once you get him down to his last legs and you've used all your scrolls, just use Donnie and he should go down fairly easily. And that's Endgame.
You defeated Shredder and saved the world. Now I can turn back to human form.
Oh, that's right. Back in the 80s, he was just a human who was turned into a rat. He's actually pretty inconsistent about that.
Thanks, you guys have excelled my skills.
Oh, Splinter's back to his real form. You guys are great. Thanks for your help. Let's celebrate with a pizza. Well, that's anticlimactic. The Adventures of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. is concluded. Oh wait, what's that? We still have like 6 more games? Well then I'm just a blatant liar. And yeah, rather anticlimactically, it just ends there. It actually does circle back to the title screen, but that's about it. And how is it? I'd recommend avoiding it at almost any cost unless you're a real fan of the Turtles and want to check it out, because it's really a bit too hard for its own good. It has great music, which is the only part I can recommend looking up, but for the most part, just watch the AVGN video on it, and you don't need to touch it ever again. If you want to play it, though, for whatever reason, it's on the NES, the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, DOS, MSX, ZX Spectrum, and the PlayChoice 10. Keep in mind, at least one of those ports is actually impossible without using some cheat codes, or glitches, or whatever. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. Have a great night, and take care, everyone.